Hi, this is Dan Attias, and you're watching the TV Writer Podcast.
I want to welcome you to the TV Writer Podcast, partner of Script Magazine, episode 122 for November 30th, 2021. Well, today I have the pleasure of bringing you an interview with Dan Attias, who I don't even want to mention the titles that he's directed, because he's probably directed most of what you've seen. Everything from The Sopranos to Buffy the Vampire Slayer to Lost to The Walking Dead to The Boys, which is on Amazon currently, and lots of stuff over the last several decades. Welcome, Dan. How are you doing?
Thank you, Graham. I'm doing well. Delighted to be with you.
Yeah, and I do want to mention one of the reasons we're here is to talk about your brand new book, Directing Great Television, which I absolutely loved, and particularly because, very similar to Kelly Edwards, who wrote The Executive Chair, interviewed her a couple episodes ago. Before her book, there wasn't really something giving you a window into the life of an executive. The other side of the room as we're pitching TV shows. I really felt before I read this book, there was this curtain covering of the mysteries of directing television, and there isn't a lot out there talking about what a TV director specifically goes through, and it's very different than features. And so I'm really, really excited to talk to you today.
Thank you very much.
Very, very cool. Just so we have context for your book, why don't you tell me a little bit about how you got started and what led towards television directing?
Well, after college and admission to law school, which I never attended, I flirted with the notion of being an actor, and I studied acting for 3 years, and which turned out, incidentally, to be, I think, the best training I ever got as a director, because I got, for obvious reasons, I got the experience of acting, and I learned what it made sense to hear from a director if you needed help kind of arriving at a place where you could perform. But I quickly realized that my talent really was more for directing, because in directing I was able to kind of get out of my way a little better than I could in acting. In acting I was troubled by a lot of self-consciousness and a lot of kind of critic over my shoulder, and when I was kind of personally on the line being evaluated, embodying something, I think I didn't have quite as much access to my inner resources as I found I did directing. And directing also permitted me to take a more primary role in the storytelling, and I think that's really my calling. That's really what I love. Story is perhaps something we'll get into in this talk about what it really touches on, because I think we all define ourselves by stories. We have stories about who we are, which are often not even in our conscious awareness, but they rule us. They point us in directions that it would be helpful to be more aware of what those stories were, and that they are in fact stories and might be altered. So I'm fascinated by story, but that was kind of my interest, which pointed me to becoming a director.
Well, that was actually probably the biggest thing that impressed me about your book is I had previously thought the director of a television show was primarily responsible for sort of setting the look of the series and the shot, working with the director of photography, of course, and then getting the performances out of the actors. But I didn't realize just how much you are a key storyteller in the process, and just how much control you have over the story. And there's many anecdotes in your book that bring that to life. But I think about the control you have over point of view, and also the subtext that you can give an actor. I mean, why don't we jump right into that? How is it that you elicit the performance you want out of an actor?
Well, every actor is, of course, an individual, and directing is a very intimate process. And so the first thing to say about it, I think, really is that you're bringing yourself to a particular individual, and you're trying to help them see the demands of the scene in a particular way. But you're appealing to them to do something that is quite rare and extraordinary. We go to shows and cinema and television to kind of often see actors live out things we would rather not live out ourselves. We'd like to see them have an experience that might be more difficult for us. Certainly there's also the vicarious enjoyment of seeing someone kind of fulfilling a fantasy we might have. But the actor really has to be fully open to his or her inner resources and channel what wants to come through. The best actors do this, that aren't simply technical performances where they're kind of, showing you something as opposed to really embodying it. So what's important for the actor is to have an open channel to less conscious resources even. And so, what I'm trying to do in approaching the actor first is in getting their trust, being as authentic as I possibly can be, so they will be more inclined to open, first to me, but really what my goal is for them to open to themselves. And then to help direct their attention to where I feel the needs of the story are for this particular scene. So that, it's a common misconception. People think, like on a television show in its third or fourth year, oh, this actor knows the character. Well, that's certainly true. They are closer to the character certainly than I am in coming in, say, in that situation. But it's my job to make sure that that every moment is focused and is a building block, is an element of the story we're telling. So often I'm really in the position of trying to acquaint them, familiarize themselves with what story are we telling, what is this moment in the story, what are their characters' intentions, what's the motivation, what are the obstacles they're going to confront, so that we can really make every moment in the scene rich with dynamism. That's what I think is compelling to watch. You want to watch something happening. You don't want to just see something presented. And so I'm always trying to emerge with what feels to me like life, like a truthful moment. And, if you really examine every moment you live, you always have a motivation, you always have an intention, you're always kind of having an experience. You're not just reading lines because it's your turn to speak. I don't know what I'm going to say to you in the next minute. So, you really are trying to help the actor get to that state where even though the lines are scripted, and they may have rehearsed them and known them, and we know what's going to happen down the line, you try to get them to the point where they can have a fresh experience in each moment, and that and be present to their partners in the scene. Because, if you have a plan, for example, how you're going to act the moment, it will feel like that. If you're not responsive to to what your acting partner kind of gives you, you're missing all the many ways real human interaction occurs. So getting the performances is one of the great challenges and opportunities and responsibilities of a director, and there are many, many ways it can be approached. And it really depends so often on the individual with whom you're dealing. Some actors need simply to know their intention. If they don't, and they've likely given it some thought. So I'll be, responding to what I sense is their intention. Often I'll want to mirror back to them, particularly if I want to make a change, an adjustment. I want first to mirror back to them that I understand what their intention was, that they were playing, so that they can feel seen. This is just, it's like, it seems to me, basic human relations. It's like we all want to be seen. An actor is likely given a lot of thought to the performance they're going to give. And to simply come in and say, no, do it this way, runs the risk of really dispiriting them. It's like, well, did you even see what I was trying? So I like to kind of first make sure that they feel seen. But then if it's not serving the story, I'll try to acquaint them with how I perceive this moment in the story and what I believe the intention might be. And giving them an intention is kind of the first, most basic way to kind of, approach adjusting a performance. But that's only one element. Then you're going to want to talk about, like, okay, what's the opposition to your intention? What are the obstacles to it? And you start working with each scene and it's interesting. A lot of scenes, actors might come in with understand an intention and play it, but it doesn't change in the course of the scene. They're playing the same beat and the same intention the whole way. When in reality, I think, we adjust our intentions based on how they're received, how our gambit, how our play has been, received. Did we get what we wanted? Or, I see this person is cagier than I thought. I might have to adjust, my strategy. And for scenes to stay alive, you need that sense of, life, of really, why. So I'll try to look for, what has just happened in the exchange that has led to an adjustment? What's the strategy? Physicalizing is something I think is really also important in eliciting a performance. I think, the body is, I write this in the book on the, I have a chapter on addressing this whole subject on getting the performance, but, the body is an exquisite organ of expression. I mean, even now, here I'm using my hands. It's, it's like when I'm invested in trying to convey something to you, it's like, it's wonderful if it's embodied, as opposed to me just kind of sitting here answering the question. And in scenes, in life, actors, human beings communicate physically. We've heard a lot about body language. Sometimes I think in terms of staging a scene, it's interesting to consider how a scene would be received if you just turned the sound off and just watched. And could you understand in the behavior of the characters what was going on? And I think generally the scenes are certainly more embodied that way, but also deeper. I think they create in the actor a less self-conscious, more spontaneous performance when they can get out of their heads and actually get assisted by the movement they make. So I'll also try to work with actors in terms of physicalizing their intention. So you have an intention, but then I like to see it physicalized. So, and there's all kinds of sly, subtle, interesting ways actors can do that. I mean, just something as basic, for example, as if a character is depressed, they may be in a certain posture, and you kind of get that sense if they're down. Or if they're full of life and, full of themselves, they're going to be positioned a different way. Or if they don't really want to confront the other person, they may find activity. As you're entering me, let me just kind of attend to this stuff over here. No, I'm with you. They'll find physicality that will assist them in accessing the motive, but also assist the audience in understanding it.
Well, and you talked a lot about how, as a director, you have to be very self-aware and honest with your own motivations and intentions. And you talked about how if you don't do that, how you can have a bias towards the performance. Talk about that.
Well, the path of directing has been, I love it so much because it's deeply humbling because, first of all, I think to do it well, you have to confront not knowing, to make discoveries which are going to be fresh and interesting for your audience and for, and serve the material. I think, it's more exciting when you make discoveries. And because I think we want the audience to experience discovery within themselves. So it's humbling in that respect. And also I've learned too that we all, as I mentioned a moment ago, we all have our own narratives of who we are. And if, for example, we made a determination that, like, I can't experience a certain emotion. I don't want to touch rage. I don't want to touch my anger. It's going to be very hard to really, in a full-bodied way, encourage an actor to get in touch with that if that's what the scene requires. Now, if you're not even conscious of this problem, of this, I wouldn't say it's a problem, we all have blockages, but if you're not even conscious of it, you may not even let yourself go there in imagining for the actor that this is what really might be underpinning the scene, and encouraging the actor to explore that. That's a real basic kind of example of that.
Really, your process begins when you first get the script, long before you get to the set, and I really got an appreciation for just how much work you put in to understanding the motivations and intentions in every scene, and at least the impression I get is that there's often times where you have to do extra work to really bring out the truth of a scene.
Yeah, one of the things I love about directing series television is the opportunity to enter so many different worlds, really. And I consider every show essentially to have its own world. And by that I mean, its own sensibility, its own way of kind of presenting drama, its own tone, its own visual style, how it asks, it allows us to see, what angles it presents and how it sees the world. So each show has its own sensibility, its own, qualities. And I'm often really drawn to shows where excite me and feel different. And I get particularly excited about getting an opportunity to direct them because I know in order for me to tell a story in that world, I have to completely immerse myself in it and make it mine. Learn to see in the way this show sees. It's like the metaphor I like to use. It's like it's as if I want to fully learn the language of it so I can then speak it in my voice. I don't want to be just mimicking things. I don't want to say, okay, they do this kind of angle, I'll just do that kind of angle. It's like that's technical and probably less impactful. But I mean, really, what I think any of us bring as directors is ourselves, is our unique kind of response to the material. What we, I also feel if I can't succeed at finding a way I personally care about a story I'm telling, I don't think I can make anybody else care about it. So I have to find a way to connect in a way I deeply care about and can invest in. Not just because it becomes important to me, but also it calls up my own creative resources. It's something that, it's that interesting place of having to kind of be willing not to know and to be willing to, call on resources to come to one's assistance, and that's where discoveries are made. And if you don't care about them, I don't think those resources are gonna be there for you. So every show, I feel my job is to immerse myself in it. You mentioned, accurately that my sense of these shows is that when I'm directing, or any director is the storyteller. But what's interesting is that in series television, you're also serving the vision of the showrunner. So to call it your story is a little misleading. It's not really one's own story. It's the story that has been. It's the opportunity that's been given to you to add to the ongoing story of this particular show and to be faithful to that story, to be consistent with all the elements, to honor what the writers or showrunners' intentions are. But my feeling is, unless I can make that story mine, take responsibility for the storytelling while I am directing it. I understand when I finish it, I'll edit it and turn it over and they'll do what they want to do. But hopefully I've enhanced it. Hopefully I've enriched it. I've taken it to places that don't contradict what the showrunners or writers want, but actually enrich it, so that's because otherwise, then what are we bringing? What are we, why are we here? And it's such a collaborative art, filmmaking. There's so many people contributing creatively that that's another thing. I hope that I'm able to kind of elicit the creative contributions of my collaborators, because everybody has their own area of expertise, particularly department heads. The director of photography is, has a particular way of seeing and has expertise in that area. The art director has, his or her own, strengths. And the job of directing is often to really elicit everybody's buy-in on the vision you're trying to, convey, and to bring their own creativity. The director is the one who kind of needs to assess, does this particular suggestion support the story I'm telling, or we're all telling, or not?
Very, very cool. And in that collaboration, it's not unlike a TV writer, staff writer on up. You're serving the vision of the showrunner, but that doesn't mean you don't bring your own expertise to the table. And you might have some writers who excel in the funny, and some excel in the drama. And you might have some episodes that are more humorous episodes, and some are more dramatic. And so, of course, we know the director can make a huge difference. I don't know if it'd be fair to say an example. There are two versions of Dune.
Yeah.
The one that just came out, exceptional. The other one, not so much. Same story.
Mm-hmm. Well, just to kind of pick up on a few of the themes you just mentioned, there really is no such thing as just shooting the script. Go shoot the script. Some people, use that phrase. What that would be, as far as I can tell, would be photographs of words on a page. A script needs to be interpreted and translated and brought to life by all the many, elements that are available, of course, to the actors and everybody else. But the director is the one who is really charged with interpreting it. And so one of the things that happens on most television shows is that there is something called a tone meeting. So that when I get a script, for example, I love these tone meetings because I get to sit with the writer or the showrunner or both, and really drill down on each scene and really inquire what was in your mind when you were writing this scene, and what's the intention here, what's the point of view, what do you hope to emerge from after this scene, what has happened between the characters, how does that prepare for this next scene. I'll try to get everything that was in their mind. I'll also try to get a sense of the subtext, and by that I mean what is really going on apart from what is said, because in life we very rarely speak our truth. We often don't even know what our truth is. We're motivated by things we may not even be conscious of. But even if we are, we're very self-protective and guarded and feel like we have to present only partial truths. But the real drive, the real intention, for example, is often below the surface, below the lines. So that's something I really want to find out from the writers, what they believe, is going on the subterranean levels of the storytelling, because that's where it really lives, I think. That's what you're really hoping for. And then it's my job to interpret that and to bring it alive. And now often the writers will really give me plenty to work with in a way that I can then connect to. Okay, I know the story we're telling. But, there's also the truth that, it's like, I also regard that as an invitation to me to see what I can do to enhance that. And maybe make some of the same story points in other ways. Say, for example, visually, that the writer might not have thought about. Like a point of view that some character kind of we establish is what that character is looking at, or how I shoot the coverage. If I want to direct the audience's attention to what is at issue and whose point of view it is, that'll affect how I'll choose my camera angles. So all of these things are things I can bring to bear once I've determined what story are we telling. Now sometimes the story that the writers will convey to me doesn't excite me. Well, I can't just say I'm not doing it, and I rarely can have the option of saying, how about a rewrite, to because I'm generally handed the script like 7 or 8 days before I have to start shooting, and that there's a raft of things that have to be done to prepare. But I have to do my own inner work at figuring out how might I connect to this, how might I make this exciting to me and therefore exciting to the audience. How can I make this something I can care about? And that's when I have to go to work and try to really drill down in ways that maybe the writers were not thinking of. But I try to use what they've done as an inspiration, so that it's not going to contradict what they're saying, but it might augment it and give me something to kind of sink my teeth into, perhaps give me a way to suggest an actor think about something. And often at the end of the day, it's invisible to the writers. They may not. They oh, the scene really worked great. They may not be conscious even of what work the actors and I and others have done to kind of make it feel alive. But it's not their job to tell us how to do it. Their job is to write good material, and our job is to interpret it and make it come alive.
And you've got some great anecdotes and case studies in your book, and we obviously don't have time to go into every one. But why don't you illustrate say for instance, you had a courtroom series of scenes in Homeland that just weren't, I don't know if you would say that they weren't working for you, but you weren't getting to the performance you needed.
That was interesting because Homeland is a show I was privileged to direct for all but one of its seasons, and an episode or two each year. And it was a show I loved, and I'd always, every time, if my episode was, say, episode number 8, I'd be reading all the scripts, and I'd be so excited, oh, this is fantastic. And sometimes I'd been fortunate to get scripts. There was one in particular in the 4th season, which is among my favorite shows that I've been able to direct. It was called 13 Days in Islamabad. It was the takeover of the American embassy in Pakistan. It was just filled with both great action and deep character stuff, and just something happening every turn, and stakes could not be more enormous, and so it was really exciting. And then this particular episode you're alluding to, which I do write about in the book in more detail than I'll be able to give here, but it was in, I think, the 6th season, and I'd been following along, and the stories were, oh, this is great, I can't wait, and the high stakes drama was fantastic. And I got my script, and suddenly it seemed like they had just called a halt to all the high stakes drama. Everything was everything else was treading water so that they could focus on about a 20-page trial sequence where Carrie Mathison, played by Claire Danes, was trying to retain custody for her daughter, Franny, who, and Carrie's sister was petitioning to take over. And not only was there a 20-page trial sequence, but all of Carrie's scenes leading up to that were preparing for it. And not only that, in the previous episode, she had a manic episode and was put in a hospital and was given electroshock therapy, so that at the beginning of the episode, she was kind of not the Carrie we were used to seeing. She was very kind of, I wouldn't say numbed, but did not have her normal reactive kind of impulses. So I'm thinking, okay, how to make this dramatic? And I, of course, talked to the writers, and they said, well, and what became clear was that there was an overriding series need for Carrie's character to be done with parenting Franny, because she was about, in the next season, the fans of the show will recall, I guess this was the second to last season, because she winds up going to Russia, and if you remember the way the series panned out, she was like a prisoner in Russia for 8 months, and she comes back, it's like, so dealing with a child that you have responsibility for was kind of had to be dealt with. So they were going to say, okay, this is the way we're going to get rid of her parental responsibilities. The problem, as I saw it, was the way the trial scene was written was it was a parade of witnesses coming on the stand, talking about how terrible a parent Carrie Mathison had been, all the terrible things she had done, ignoring Franny when some world crisis had happened and she had to run off to some place, or some terrorist came around her doorstep and the child was witnessing something horrible. And all the times the sister had to intervene to kind of take care of Franny. So it was relentless assault on her parenting. And not only that, there was no new information. We'd all seen all of these things happen. So it's like you're on the witness stand. Yeah, this happened. Yeah, remember in season 3 that
almost
happened.
Like a clip episode.
And remember, it was almost like a clip episode without the benefit of the clip. It was just talking, right? And what was really confounding to me was Carrie there was no dialogue of her attorney cross-examining anybody. So it was this, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened, And at the end of the day, she says, okay, my sister can have Franny. So I'm thinking, okay, I get the overall need of the show. We've got to deal with this. But my episode has to, not because it's my episode, this episode has to stand on its own as a viable episode, right? So I asked the producers, I said, so, okay, what's your thought on how this works dramatically? And they said, and it was a kind of an interesting, I thought it was an interesting idea. They said, well, because Carrie has electroshock therapy, she's able to hear this thing in a new way. And yes, she went through all these experiences, but each time these witnesses give her information, she's hearing, oh yeah, I did that. Oh, that really sucked for Franny. And it's like, as she hears this all in a new way, she finally realizes, I guess this kid would be better off without being with her. And so that was the conceit. That was the idea. See, it's great she had electrothought therapy because she's like going to hear it finally. Yeah. Okay, and I'm thinking, all right, intellectually it kind of makes sense, but how dramatic is that? It's like, and if we're going to have this hearing, don't we want the audience not to anticipate the outcome? Don't we want to see some spirit to prevail from Carrie, some fight in her? Not shrill, she's not reactive, but because she loves her daughter so much, right? So I asked for some dialogue additions. I said, can we have maybe someone challenge this witness? And I said, no, we really don't think so. And I said, okay, so what's the turn? Why does it need 20 pages then? What's the turn where she makes the decision? Because I have to, convey that. And their note was, well, we think when the sister, who's been her adversary in this, when the sister gets on the stand and says, you're a hero. I think you're a hero. And I think she says it in a negative way, like, I was never a hero like you are, but you're a hero. That turns Carrie, that her sister could call her a hero. And I'm thinking, I kind of understand it, but it doesn't go in as viable. And I'm thinking, not only that, why would Carrie believe her sister? Her sister has been presented for seasons. They've always had this kind of conflict. Whenever the sisters had to take care of Franny, the sisters kind of, Carrie, you got to do better here. I can't believe you're doing this again. There's this kind of passive-aggressive kind of shaming going on. And now she's going to court and going to war. And it is a war. The previous episodes have shown it's a war. And they're not even speaking together. They're, Carrie is furious, and the sister is, Maggie is the character's name. Wonderful actress, Amy Hargreaves. And so I'm thinking, why would she be such a softie? It's like she's in this courtroom where she's going to lose the thing she loves most in life, and her sister is about to get everything she wants. So isn't it easy just to say, hey, you're a hero. Hey, you're good, you. It's like, why would she believe that? Why would she think there's, so it didn't really land for me, but I couldn't really. I said, okay, it's my job to tell this story. So the first thing I started to consider is, okay, how can I maintain audience interest? So the first thing I thought of is like, all right, Carrie is not going to have any opportunities to cross-examine. But I need the audience to feel she's also hearing that I've done these terrible things, and they're really going in, all right? But how can I avoid defeatism? How can I avoid, at the beginning of the whole trial sequence, or the middle of it even, or right up to the end of it, until she turns, how can I avoid the feeling that she's given up, or that she's just, criticizing herself horribly? And I came to this, I thought, okay, well, which is really a question, how should Claire Danes play it? So I thought, well, this seems to me the only motivation that feels like it has some promise is, yes, speaking as Carrie, yes, I see all these things, but they're going to make me feel determined never to do them again because I really see the damage. So as they go in and I see it, my belief is it's going to make me a better parent because I'm finally seeing this. So I'm going to be a better parent. Not only that, I'm the only one I love Franny more than anybody else in the world could. So I am therefore her best parent. So I am going to be a better parent, and I am going to learn from all these things. So I needed to convey that sense, but there was no dialogue to support it.
Wow.
So I thought, okay, so I met with Claire. This is a not usual thing you do in episodic directing, especially with characters who know their characters quite well. But I arranged for a pre-production meeting with Claire, and I said, look, this is our challenge in the show. This is how I make sense of it. And I described exactly that, and she said, yeah, okay, that makes sense. So I said, so somehow you're going to have to walk that tightrope, just in your looks, just in your facial expressions, of like really hearing these horrible stories about your behavior, as if for the first time, really understanding what a disservice it's been to your daughter, and also that it's going to make you a better parent, and you're not going to give this child up. Otherwise, we don't have conflict, right? So she says, great. So and I knew if anybody could do it, Claire Danes could do it. She's great, right? But that wasn't enough. It's like, and so then I started to think in the filming, okay, I'll give her physical things to do. Like as the witnesses are testifying, even though her lawyer is sitting there, mum, I'll have her make notes. Oh, he said that. Like she's mounting a defense. She's thinking of an answer, So I said, okay, I got that. But still, it just wasn't landing for me. And the thing that really wasn't landing for me was the moment of the turn. That she's going to be called a hero and she's just going to say, oh, I forgive you for coming to court to take my sister away. I'm a hero? That's great. I really like myself now. And I'll just give you my daughter in return. I didn't buy it, right? So a sequence like this it was 20 pages. It took 2 or 3 days to film. I forget what. And for those of you who bristle at, my God, 10 pages a day, but in a courtroom situation, sometimes you can do that because people are just stationary, and we had 3 cameras and all that. But it was still broken up. And the first day we did all this testimony, and Claire was doing her best to do all this. And the next day was going to be the crushing testimony, which was going to be the sister finally getting on the stand. And in that testimony, what was scripted was, her being very, adamant about, yes, she did this and she did that. And not only that, it was worse because this happened also. And then what was scripted was the judge says, and I understand you have something more you'd like to say, that you'd like to read a statement to her. And she says, yes, I would. And she takes the statement and then she puts it down. She looks at it and she says, I'm not going to read it. I'm just going to talk to my sister. And she says, and I asked, in the tone meeting, I'd asked the writers, okay, so what do we feel is happening there? And what I emerged with was a sense like she was kind of lamented that things had gotten so adversarial and so angry. And she was just going to say, look, let's not be at war. I really don't hate you. This is not about me. This is, let's say, just get human. I just really think this is best for Franny. She tried to make an appeal that way. Yeah. And I just, the night before she was going to testify, I was still sticking in my craw. How could I make this interesting? And I started to think, I tried to put myself, which is what one does as a director, is like, I started to think, what would it take to move me if I were in Carrie's position? What would it take to move me from my sister's testimony that after that I'm going to agree to give up my daughter? And I couldn't for the life of me come up with anything that I had been given to think about before or that I had come up with before until I started to think, maybe I've been thinking about this wrong. And this goes to like defining the story, right? Because the story I'd been thinking about, this is the story of Carrie giving up custody of her child. Which it is. That's one way to think of the story. But then I thought, well, what if I were in Carrie's position, what would move me? And I thought, okay, what about in the sister's testimony? If I were watching my sister testify in those situations, what would cut through my own rage at her and judgment at her and this butting of heads that we've already done for 3 seasons or 5 seasons? And I realized, well, what if she is facing as big of a challenge as Carrie is in some important way? What if this testimony is as difficult for her as it needs to be for Carrie, as this whole process has been for Carrie? And I started to think, what if this is, I just came up with a dramatic idea. It's like, what if this is the hardest thing she's ever had to do in her life, coming to give this testimony? And I started to think, why might that be? And I thought, well, and I started to look at the dialogue, and I started to think, well, in the dialogue is interesting. When she puts down the written statement and wants to talk directly to Carrie, she recites their family history. And I started to really read that family history. And what it revealed was she was recounting a history in which she always felt less than her sister. She always felt Carrie was the apple of the father's eye. She was always the adventurous one. She was always the one who would climb the tree or would, do the bold, adventurous thing. And that she herself felt she couldn't do those things. And so she admired her sister. And, but then she goes on to say, but there are other things, I'm not a hero. I'm not a hero. I'm just a person. But I think I'm really better with Franny. Now that was always presented to me in the tone meeting and elsewhere, so that's her gambit. She's trying to say, look, let's just, put the fighting aside. But then I started to think, what if that's the most difficult thing what if she's never admitted these things to the world? And what if she's felt shame about it herself? I started to construct a whole kind of idea wow, what if she's admitting something in this public setting that is the hardest thing for her to admit? Namely, I have always felt less than you. I have battled my own self-esteem because what a star you were. And I hated you. So to say that as a confession, as a source of shame, instead of you were great and I hated you and this and that, no, to make it the most difficult thing she'd ever have to say. And why would that be so difficult? Because it's something she still felt shame about. She still felt less than her sister. And then I started to think, well, that would move me. If I felt this person on the stand was really struggling with something and was paying a price to share this, in order to get to the deeper point, so I felt all those things, but that's not why I'm doing this now. I have to come clean to you so that you can see my true motivation. And then what I loved about this, I'm not finished going on, I hope your listeners aren't bored already from how long-winded I'm going on this, but what I always felt watching the seasons prior, all the episodes, is there was something funny about it. She was always a little sanctimonious in putting Carrie down for you're not being a good parent. For God's sakes, Carrie was saving a terrorist attack and doing all these other things, And I realized there's a certain we could reinterpret that as a kind of certain passive aggression. A weakened character who hasn't really owned her own value, who feels less than her sister, but can lord it over her a little bit by saying, you're not a good parent. And I thought that's what she's confessing. She's saying, our history is troubled. I haven't been straight with you all these years. But it's important for me that that's not why I'm doing this. This girl is suffering. And I have to come clean to you in this moment. So you can understand my true motive. It's not to make you feel bad. And I thought if she really carried that intention off, Carrie would be moved. And what's interesting then is, okay, so what turns her? It's not that she's calling her a hero. It's what she says after she's admitted, I've always thought of, you are a hero and I'm not. She's acquired credibility for Carrie. All right, you've admitted what, secretly I always kind of thought, yeah, you were envious of me. I know I'm a hero. I know I'm doing something very important. And now you're finally acknowledging it. Maybe it has equal standing with being a parent, And it gave her credibility so that the next thing she said, Carrie could hear. And the next thing she says, after she's kind of accepted a kind of humiliation for herself, faced the thing she's never been willing to face in public, in front of everybody, she says, okay, so I've always felt less than you. But don't we know, and I know your intentions are good for Franny, but can't we admit that the next time Saul calls, you're going to go do it because that's who you are? And it's that gets Carrie to see it. She sees that she's right. She says, yes, I'm in a different place now. I'm not manic depressive. I've got this thing. But she's right, because who I am is someone who has to perform this. So that, to me, changed the whole... And what's interesting to me is it changed the story. It added to the story. It wasn't just a story about Carrie's going to give up her daughter. It became a story about the rapprochement of two sisters. It became a deep story about a family. And it became truth-telling within the family. All right, so I figured all this out. I said, great, I finally got it. So now it's the night before, and I had to call up. I said, I can't just spring this on Amy, the actress, tomorrow. Just here, take this and run with it. So I called her up in the evening, and I said, I have an idea, and I'd really like to share it with you, and I'd really like you to rethink your motives, your intentions. And I told her this, and she was like, whoa, it's a huge sea change for everything she'd been approaching. But she loved it. And it's like, and actors will love, it's like when you give actors, when you find something that finally feels true with real stakes and deepens the characters. And by deepening, it's like, the worst thing is when an actor wants always to be liked and thought well of. It's like, no, the actors want their characters to be that way. It's like the great actors, and Claire is certainly one of these, and Amy is as well, want to play something real. And she finally had something real to play that was interesting, and she just took the challenge, and the next day she gave this fantastic performance. And the lines are still very spare. I mean, to this day, I'll look at that and I'll still be so moved because I'll know what she's working with, and I think it comes through, but with very spared lines because I couldn't get any lines changed. But anyway, so.
Well, and that's a great illustration of the fact that it's often not about changing the lines at all. It's about the subtext and what else you bring to the scene.
And finding, to me, it's also about, asking questions of oneself. What would interest me? How is this affecting me? And it's like, it kept affecting me as fraudulent. It's like that wasn't, another thing I feel about that scene is it's like, the showrunners gave me a certain idea about how this change happened. And, it's interesting, in a story or a script, you can want something to happen. And you can try to justify why it happens. Like she called her a hero, and that's why it happened. You can even say that it happened. Okay, it happened, but that's different from the felt experience that it actually has happened. That's what the director can bring. It's like, so that the audience, I don't think anybody would even be conscious of that. Fans of the show, by the way, might have treated this as like, okay, that's fine, but to me that's so exciting because it's like you create the sense of truthfulness. It's like it's there. It's not like figuring it out. Oh, it happened because of that. Oh yeah, I get it. No, you feel like you're witnessing it happening. And on deeper levels, I think, I think those changes gave the audience an opportunity to experience it was really happening.
I may be biased, but I don't think we ever remember the explosions or the car chases. I think we remember those truthful moments.
I couldn't agree with you more. I could not agree with you more. Yeah, and I think, I guess we all come to these experiences with different desires. For example, I've never been a fan of like revenge movies and all that, and I'm sure people want confirmation of their stories, their narratives. It's like, I want to see those guys killed. Oh yeah, let's, Dirty Harry or whatever. It's, oh good, the bad guys are getting, That's a very limited way of approaching stuff. I think most people really want to see truth, see us and see, and it's so great because, stories give us an opportunity to affect people in the deepest ways because they give us an opportunity in telling a story to ask a viewer to kind of re-examine the narratives of their own life. Like for example, Battling Prejudice. A lot of, well-meaning stories, try to do that, like humanize a certain population. It's like The Wire, which I was fortunate to direct as well. It presented, drug dealers and the underclass in nuanced ways that had never been presented before. So suddenly the narratives people might have of the drug culture, are different because they saw a different story. And they saw the humanity in these different characters in The Wire that they might have just written off as, oh yeah, those are those bad guy drug dealers and stuff like that. Well, that's interesting. Or The Sopranos is interesting too. It's like how, you took a mobster, but put him in therapy. Make him a family man. You can't just write off, Tony as being just a, big mook and a killer. It's like, wait a minute, Jesus, it's like he has these horrible impulses and these drives that are scare the hell out of me. But in many ways, I identify with him because he's also cares about his daughter, and so it makes one. It has a chance of of getting people to kind of deepen their and develop empathy.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about Junior writers, you're a staff writer, you're gradually moving up the ranks. Usually you don't get to go on set until you're at the producer level, which is sort of midway up the chain. There's very little to prepare that new producer to how to be on set. And there's a lot of your first time on set, you're trying to sort of figure out everything, and you wrote that script for that episode, and so you feel strongly about the scenes, but there can be a lot of communication issues and things like that that can impede your work as a director. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting. For a long while, it was very unusual for writers to be on the set. The Directors Guild has been very strong in kind of establishing certain creative rights for the director, and several of them, they're still in place where, for example, writers are not permitted to talk to actors, give actors notes on a set, unless the director has asked for that or permitted that. And there's also, as the Directors Guild is often also fighting for, not being right over a director's shoulder let the director find the staging, for example, or develop the scene in repeated takes without, assaulting them with a ton of notes right away. Do it this way, do it this. You're getting in the way of the creative process of the director. A lot of writers, and unfortunately, really don't appreciate what a director brings and what the process is in terms of developing a performance, bringing an actor along, not necessarily telling them everything in one slew of notes and like they're at television, so you just turn a knob. It's like it's interpersonal. So, the sets, how sets ought to operate is that the director is the one delivering notes. However, I personally do enjoy having writers with me, so long as they understand. I have to translate. A writer, I'll always welcome input if they think a certain subtext isn't getting realized or it's going in a direction which is different than they intended. I want that input. I want the writers to be pleased. I mean, if they're the showrunner, they're my boss. I mean, they're the ones who are going to determine if I come back or not. So I do have, as I hope I indicated before, I have tremendous respect for the work they've put into kind of creating this script. And they've thought long and hard about it, longer than I have. I've just started, during the prep period. They've been working on it for maybe months. So their input is important, but the best showrunners and the more seasoned writers understand that the director has to carry the ball once the set is in operation. Now, many shows, I'd say the majority in my recent experience, the writers are on set with you. They're sitting with you at the monitor. And I personally enjoy that, so long as I say they understand the boundaries, understand, procedures. Sometimes you asked about young writers on the set, and most showrunners understand this, most seasoned writers understand this. When you get an inexperienced writer on set, a couple of things can happen that are possible pitfalls. One, that writer considers his or her boss to be the showrunner, and they want to make sure they feel like they're an emissary of that person, and they've spent hours in the writer's room talking about a particular scene, and they dread that the scene might get shot and finished and all kinds of things weren't in it that had been talked about in the writer's room, and so they'll get anxious about it not being done. Or maybe the showrunner had expressed, I think this is going to be great if at that moment this character stands up and moves over and does this thing, and it's like, and what if that's not in the staging? And it's like, it gets nervous. It's not going to be exactly as they talked about it. And when that kind of anxiety comes in, it can infect. The set is such an interesting place. It's like a petri dish, right? It's like, and I take that, and the director has tremendous responsibility in setting the tone on a set. Early in my career, it's like, whenever, one thing I talk about in the book as well is the tremendous challenge that often is unacknowledged, which is the vast range of emotional states you go through as a director, from stress to elation to, panic and fear. All these things kind of are assaulting you as you're seeing a scene not come together, or time crunch, I'm not going to get this, but you're also in the position of being the leader and the one in command, and the one that is kind of setting the tone for everybody else. So if you start running around like a chicken with your head cut off, everybody else starts doing it too, vibrating. So there's, and there's no magic pill to take to, get around that. And the same goes true for a writer who is like, if they intrude in the process in a way that's not helpful or that's disruptive, it can have waves and, So when I deal with young writers, what I try to do is assure them you're going to be heard, I might say, for example, I'd really rather not get a note from you on the first take or on the first rehearsal, because I may, be perceiving the same thing you're perceiving, and I'll have a way of kind of bringing the actor around, and I'll make an adjustment, But after, I would say try to hold your fire until maybe take 2. And I promise I'll make this guarantee too. I'll say, sometimes I'll have to do this just because I can read the sense of the person. I'll say, I won't move on. If I'm happy after take 2, I'll consult with you. I'll see, what do you think? Do you have other concerns? I may try to do that. Some directors, feel like that's not even something they should do. I don't agree with that. I think of this as a collaborative process. I also recognize television. The power really resides with the writers, and for good reason. There has to generate not just this script, but a whole canvas, a whole wider, thing. So I like to include a writer. I like to get that input. I want them to be happy, but I also want them to let me get the results I think, are there to get.
Very, very cool. And you have a lot of very specific examples. And I actually, one of the things I appreciated about your book is that you started with some horror stories. You started with a lot of things that can go wrong. And so it's not an exact science, I would say.
Well, one of the points I try to make in the book is that becoming a director is so challenging in at least this respect, many respects, but in this respect, in that, you can't go from like partially doing it. You go from having none of the responsibility to having all of the responsibility. You can't like saying, hey, we'll let Dan come in and he's starting out. Let's, why don't you direct, this scene and that scene? Oh, that's an action scene. You'll get that one too. That'll give you a good experience. And we'll take it from there. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
There's one director. And so you don't really, the learning curve is, you're just thrown into the deep end, right?
Yeah.
And so at the start of the career, it's like, if anyone has made the transition seamlessly, I think I write, I'd like to meet that person, because it's like without making errors of consequence.
Yeah.
I'd like to meet that person. And I did want to, come clean with everybody.
Yeah.
It's like, I've been fortunate to have a lot of success in my career, and I've been able to work on fantastic shows. And I now am at a point where I, can solve things, often pretty quickly. But that doesn't, I didn't jump out of, the starting gate and act that way. My first jobs were challenging because of so much I didn't know. So I do relate a couple of really difficult experiences, but I also want to emphasize that what felt like horrible experiences at the time were so valuable to me because they made me confront myself. They acquainted me with realities on a set that I was not familiar with. And I learned tremendously. It's like, and I don't think I would have learned any other way but through, making mistakes or not understanding the situation for what it was.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's something that it didn't strike me until I read your book, but I know several TV directors, including people who have resumes about as long as yours, and I haven't met one yet that didn't have what I would call a beginner's mind. And the ones I know who post on Instagram are constantly posting about old movies they're watching to try to learn techniques and things like that. It sounds like that's a really big part of the craft.
I would even extend that to anybody who's successful at being creative. It's like, the interesting thing about creativity to me is it's like, or directing a show in that particular form, is we're trying to tease something to existence that doesn't exist. We're trying, sure, you can rehash things, but that's not really exciting work, but you're trying to make this particular story, come alive. And it hasn't lived before. This particular incarnation hasn't. So you don't know where it's going to, obviously you have ideas, and you're a vessel for it coming through. So you have to, build the structure around it. But that thing that's going to emerge, you don't know, and you have to be open to seeing it. If you have to know. Well, that's interesting because you just asked about tough experiences. That was my problem in my first episode. I wasn't willing for anybody to see that I didn't know. There were so many things I didn't know. And, part of that was my inexperience with camera. I didn't know, I wasn't confident with my visual choices, because film is a language. And, there are certain basic rules you do need to know, like screen direction. If one character is looking to the left side of the camera, his interlocutor should be looking at the right side of the camera, all that kind of thing. And, so I felt, okay, I'm in command. I have to come off as knowing, and I was shielding even from myself that there's so many things I didn't know and I needed help. So I've since learned, only by not knowing can be a tremendous empowering place to be, because you're open to what arises by asking a question. Not just from within yourself, but from your collaborators. Like, how might we solve this? Instead of having to be the one that's the smartest one in the room and has the answer. That leads to a lot of rehashed choices, applying old choices to new situations that might not even apply, or not being open to, discovering that one unique, perfectly appropriate choice that that you didn't know beforehand, but you can open to by what you're calling beginner's mind, which I think I agree with. I mean, that's something in a lot of spiritual traditions that they say is kind of the enlightened state, to be really, just to be open to what can come through you. And if you don't have that, I find you kind of recycle a lot of things, and it's kind of a deadened result.
Yeah. Well, we're coming to the end here. The one thing I did want to ask as we close out is, television has exploded. There's so many hundreds more shows than there used to be. And obviously there's going to be a need for new directors. What would you say to somebody who wants to be a television director? What's the best way to approach getting into the industry?
Yeah, that's it's very challenging for the reason I cited a minute ago, that you don't get a kind of trial run at it. You don't get to do it partially, and you're asking employers to kind of take a chance on you that you've never done it before. So, I think a few things. First of all, you don't learn how to direct by not directing. So I would really encourage young filmmakers to make films, even if you're using your iPhone, and cut it together on a iMovie or something. See how your choices work. Break down scenes. Figure out how would I tell this story? Here's a scene. What's it about? What are the characters' intentions? And really make some choices. See how they work out, and learn from what you see resulted. So do that. If you can make a short film, that's all to the better. If you can it's funny now, it's like the entry level seems to be the easiest thing to do, might be to make an independent feature for very little money. But you got to get on the map, and you got to try to you have to get material that you can show to prospective employers. So that's important. But the television landscape, in many ways, is harder to break into than features, because it's such a condensed amount, it's such a condensed process that the decisions have to be made quickly, and you have less time to do it. And so I don't really, know any direct line to becoming a television director. Often you really have to maybe think about other positions you can fill, and get on a show that way, and get known on the show. And then maybe if you have some source material you can show, that's one way. But often it's really, if you have footage you can show is really important. But it's everybody's story is different, how they got in. And, some people are editors, they got into it doing that way. Some people, I actually had been an assistant director, but that's not how I got hired. I went back to film school and finished my MFA and had a film, and that got me actually my first job, which was a feature, Stephen King's Silver Bullet, and then as a result of that, I got hired on Miami Vice, which is one of my first jobs. But it's, I would say the most important thing, developing yourself. Getting the job is kind of, who knows how that's going to happen. You got to follow up every possible lead. You got to knock on every door. You got to be willing to deal with rejection. You got to be persistent. You got to, all of those things. It's like, maybe that's the answer. It's like, there's no direct line, and so you got to do everything. You got to do everything at once. But I will say this, that the most important thing once you get the opportunity is to do your best. And I've spent my whole career getting deeper into this for myself, is get to know who you are. Get to know what you care about. Get to respect your own instincts, because that's all we bring to the table.
Yeah.
It's like, I could have just stopped, like, say, on Homeland. Okay, well, they said that's how it works, and okay, here's the scene, here it is. I mean, that's, that's how bad television gets directed. It's like when you haven't really consulted yourself, so you have to have an access to yourself. And you have to to be an artist, I think, anyway, you have to have respect for your uniqueness and your unique take on things, and you have to value that. So, I've talked to, students at film schools and stuff, and some film school professors. I remember I was in a conference with some of them, and they were saying, what's the most important thing? I said, I would think the most important thing with your students is to get them to value themselves and value how they see and value what they want to see, and not just try to figure out, well, what will get me hired, or what will, and writers too, it's like you gotta write from your own passion, from your own experience. And it's like the more technically oriented things, like, well, you got to be smart. Yes, if a certain thing is selling, you're going to try to market. You're going to try to write a sample that might be. But if you don't care about it, if you're just trying to mimic the way that show did it or that show did it, my feeling is it's not going to be very good. So in terms of starting out, I would just say follow every possible lead. Do everything you can imagine that might be helpful. For directing, I'd say take an acting class, learn how to work with actors, learn how to do actors speak, read Judith Weston's book, hopefully read my book. I have a whole chapter on that. Yeah. But also really learn who you are, what's important to you. What are your stories? What are stories that you're going to either have to put into a piece of material or be able to set aside so that you can see what story wants to be told.
Very cool. Well, we will end it there. Thanks so much for being so generous with your time.
Thank you.
I will say again, this is a book that every TV writer needs to have, every showrunner needs to have, and obviously anybody who wants to be a television director. Highly, highly recommend it.
Thank you so much. Great.
avgearguide.com uses state-of-the-art technology to bring new life to old films and videos, like the Lost Betty White series Pet Set, which they recently restored for its 50th anniversary. They can apply the same technology to your documentary, film and video archive, and family videos. Visit avgearguide.com for details. Drivingfootage.com provides 360-degree driving plates for film and TV. Over 14,000 clips are available for locations all around Southern California, with more areas coming soon. A fully equipped camera car with height-adjustable rig is available for custom shoots. Visit drivingfootage.com for details. Full disclosure, I do own both of these companies. By supporting them, you help me bring new in-person video interviews to you. Please follow me on Twitter for the latest updates. @GrayJones is my handle. Make sure to bookmark tvwriterpodcast.com and scriptmag.com. You can find the video version of this podcast at iTunes, Podbean, and on YouTube. Make sure you do subscribe to all these places. Audio only, you can find us at iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, or Pandora. And on Instagram, you can follow @TVWriterPodcast. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.